Hello, everybody. I'm Peter, and welcome to this introduction video lecture on our service representation and prototyping workshop 1. Now, this year, the entire workshop is virtual because of the corona situation. And hopefully we'll manage. And throughout the next week, we're gonna introduce a lot of techniques for using animation, video, and design fiction as a design tool for service design. And their first video here is basically an introduction to the entire course and to what the program will be throughout the week. And we will discuss some of the background for the exam, some of the formalities. But without further ado, I think we are ready to actually dive into the course. Okay, so as I said, this will basically be a short 45-minute introduction to the entire module. And I'll show you some examples and go through some of the do's and don'ts. It's not necessarily going to be 45 minutes, but it will be more or less the length that we will aim that all of these video lectures will be before we basically cut them, and you'll get a part 2. That will be true for the next video lecture also, the one on design fiction. A little about me before we get started. I'm associate professor here at Aalborg University, but I have a background with a master's degree in interaction design. It's 10 years ago or so. And after graduating, I had a couple of jobs at various tech firms, both in Aalborg and here in Copenhagen, where you are. And then I co-founded a startup, a tech startup, which we sold and then spent a year consulting some other startups on their processes. And then I ended up back at Aalborg University. They asked me to write a PhD, which I completed. And now I've done since then research primarily on the role of visualizations in ideation phases of design. And usually we would have the opportunity here to actually also talk a bit about your backgrounds, because I know that people from your education often comes from a multitude of different bachelors, some humanities, some social science, some technology, from the technical sciences. And that gives kind of a broad spectrum. So I know some of you might have had more experience than others with animation tools, video editing, narrative design, etc. So hopefully you can manage to help each other and level the playing field that way. But this course basically is all about representation. It's about representing different aspects of design through different techniques. And the course description specifically mentions this aspect of it being the non-functional aspects. That just means that it is not the technical descriptions that we are looking for here. It is not the UML diagrams and such. It is all of the service aspects that has to do with sequencing, different interactions at different touch points, and the overall experience across time, basically. And thus the course sort of manifests this in both working with some methods which are narrative and very visual, which are very much aimed at communicating to others what our ideas are, representing it so we can get feedback. And the other part of the course, Stan's course, will focus more on the prototyping part. How can we make something not just to communicate and get feedback, but actually to get testing data, to get something that we can actually test. And that basically also sums up many of the things from your study regulations. We don't want to go through them all, but you can sort of see that both the knowledge, skills, and competencies are divided amongst the sort of the visual and the narrative aspects. You can see video editing, video sketching, and different ways of representing experience in a service system, and stuff like embedded systems and sensor technology. So it's divided between these two ways of looking at service representation and prototyping all along the way. And you can also see that the word apply is mentioned more than once. And that basically tells you that this course, even though you're going to get some theory, you're going to get some methodology, then the main part of the course will be that we actually have to apply things. We have to produce some actual design outputs to evaluate what can the tools do, but also what can we do with the output from these tools. Now, my first part here, which you're having from today, Monday, and until Friday, the 27th of March here, will focus specifically upon the use of narrative design. We're specifically going to use this theoretical domain of design fiction for that. And we'll dive in and use video and animation basically as what we call temporal design materials. So basically begin to reflect upon how can we use time as a material in our service designs. How can we represent things over the course of time? And we're creating these outputs, and we're going to call them basically temporal sketches to basically frame that we're not creating the final products here. We're creating some service representation which should be used as the basis for prototyping in Dan's course, part 2, where you will, depending on where the entire corona situation ends up in Denmark, you will begin to work with microcontrollers, sensors, and actuators, implement microcontrollers in your prototypes to create these Internet of Things kind of prototypes. But only, of course, if we can manage to actually gain access to the laboratories again at the university. I know Dan is thinking long and hard right now about contingencies if that cannot be done. So he will come out with some messaging for you later on if it's not going to be possible to go to the lab. But hopefully everything works out. And if we can't go to the lab, I know Dan will have a great solution for you. But it is basically this transition that hopefully you can use some of the stuff from part 1 in part 2. At least I've seen that the other years. And the entire course, of course, has an exam. It is both a written and an oral exam where you write a short 5 to 10 pages of reflection based upon the process and the output products that you have produced in these 2 workshops. And to that we have sort of a minimum requirement of productions. In this part 1 of the workshop, where we work with video and animation, we set a bar of approximately 3 to 6 produced video sketches. And I'll get back to sort of the details of that later. And in Dan's workshop, there's a minimum of 1 hardware prototype, depending on, of course, also where that lands in the current situation. Now, when I say 3 to 6 video sketches, it is an approximation. It is not to say that if you create 2 very elaborate sketches, which elaborate a very detailed service journey, well, then that might be fine. But we usually see that it is among that, and it has to be more than 1 at least, because we actually want you to explore more than 1 idea, more than 1 service system representation in this course. And usually we actually see people produce in the groups more than 6 also. We have had years where some have produced 8, 10 maybe even. Of course, it is dependent on the process here. We are planning this so you actually produce these things in your groups, so you work in your semester groups, even though you're dislocated. We'll figure out some ways of actually having you to collaborate. I'll refer to the Discord room that I created and linked on your Moodle server. I'll also post a short video where I sort of show you how I am thinking we can use this Moodle, this Discord server. That might be one way for you to collaborate. But again, you can collaborate on creating the sketches and the hardware prototype. So even though that the paper, the 5 to 10 pages are individually written, and the oral exam of 15 minutes is also individual, then of course you can collaborate on the sketches themselves and the hardware prototype itself. So that can be group-based. And the exam format is pass and or fail, basically. But please ask questions throughout the workshop. And of course, if it is questions about workshop part 2, ask them to Dan, write him an email, and we'll do our best to answer them in this current situation, which is a bit wobbly. We don't even know if the exams will be in June. As of now, it is the plan, but they are subject to change right now. But what is not subject to change is this week. We're going to go through design as an explorative genre and design fiction as a design approach. That's going to be what we're doing today. I will upload another video lecture about these 2 points. And then tomorrow I will upload a video lecture with video as a sketching material, as sort of the theoretical and methodological basis. And it will also cover the sort of addition of animation and what happens when we combine things that are both temporal as video, but also more fluid in their design as animation, where we can basically create anything and represent anything. How do we constrain ourselves, and how do we use the possibilities to the benefits of a service design process? And the fifth thing here is that the tool that we're gonna show you some hands-on introduction, some how-to videos, will be Adobe Premiere. You can, of course, use whatever tool you might already know. If you know Final Cut Pro or Avid or any other video or motion graphics editor, feel free to use it. We're just going to cover it as sort of the catch-all, and for the how-to guide, it will be Adobe Premiere in this workshop, plus a series of other tools that you can use to do quick animations and quick motion graphics. We'll cover that in the next couple of days. And it will be so that today is the shortest day. Today is this introduction and the design fiction lecture. I will also post a quick start video to those of you who have never ever used a video editing software before or never used Adobe Premiere before. It might be a good idea to use an hour in the afternoon to actually get up to speed with that. But other than that, then Tuesday, we will dive into both the method and the practicalities of using these tools to actually create design sketches. I'll upload a rather long series of method and examples, a video lecture where we will cover the methods, but also basically just show you a lot of video sketches from previous years and discuss them. And then you get some how-to videos. And then hopefully in the end of the day, Tuesday, you will be sort of in the process of beginning to figure out what aspects of your semester project as a case should you actually begin to sort of figure out. Should we represent this part of the journey? Should we take this idea that we already have? Do we actually have a new idea? Do we gain some new interesting ideas when thinking about it through the scope of having to tell it as a narrative, for an example? And Wednesday and Thursday, and I can see that I wrote Thursday 2 times, they are basically dedicated for your production. So you will have a lot of time there to actually produce your animation-based video sketches. And I'll be online for supervision on Discord or on Skype if everything else fails. And we can do some screen sharing, stuff like that. So hopefully we'll manage, and hopefully you will get a lot of production made those 2 days, even though that you sit dislocated in the groups. And then Friday, we will end this workshop with an online critique session, where we basically upload what we've managed to create this week and give each other some feedback on it. And you can use this feedback as basically part of your reflection materials in your exam assignment. So hopefully you're all on board with that plan, so we can end the workshop with actually preparing you with some of the reflections for your exam also. Now I posted to Moodle this more graphical plan of it all, where you can see that the blue is the uploaded video lectures. There might be more, so whenever in the other parts of the workshop that you have some questions or some techniques that we figure out, okay, this is actually something you would like to do, then I'll make a short video and I'll upload it and maybe do it live or do it asynchronous. But so there will be more blues along the way. We have just not planned them yet because we don't know what you will actually need to create. And then the green ones are basically where we have dedicated time for your group work. And the red ones are some live sessions that we're planning, where we basically check in with me, where you all come online on Discord and we can talk about what is going well, what is difficult right now. Are there some extra techniques, some things that I should show you again, etc. like that. So we will have basically a meet and greet later today at 1. And we will have 2 of the status meetings at Wednesday and Thursday. And Friday, of course, we have the design feedback session. So they will be live. So there is a combination of activities here. And that being said, that is basically the practicalities of this week that we're going through. And sort of the main meta framing of this workshop is based on a paper that I wrote a couple of years ago with a colleague of mine, where we sort of proposed that service design, service system design, your field basically, can be seen between sort of a micro, meso, and a macro level of methods, basically. When the micro level, we have all the details of a service touchpoint, interface design, aesthetics, things that can be measured in usability, user experience design, so to speak. And up in this middle service design meso level, we often have these customer journeys. That is where we begin to pinpoint touch points. We begin to talk about the transition between touch points. It's often where we begin to do these experience prototyping kind of things, where we act things out and figure out how will stakeholders respond, etc. And then up on the macro level, that's where your education becomes really interesting, where you actually take the systemic or more strategic approach to this field, saying, okay, what about the actors? How many different actors have access to what? What is the entire service blueprint? What are the touch points in a more abstract manner? And our hypothesis is basically that amongst these levels of service design, animation and video can basically cover the full spectrum and even make it sometimes easier to take our existing tools and actually communicate them across these fields. So we don't just focus down in one quadrant, in one field here, but actually show that service systems design is a transition from macro to micro and back and forth. And that's the hypothesis that I basically invite you to investigate also together with me, of course, this week. So reflect upon it when you do the things in this week. When does it actually make sense to use animation and video in service design representation? And when are there some constraints, and what are they? That might be some of the great reflections to create based on a workshop like this. And as you've probably seen on Moodle, there is a lot of literature I've put up on this course, but 2 of the main sources is the humble brag of putting my own book as one of the sources. I wrote this book, Sketching with Animation, which is basically a text and method book for this entire thing that we're working with this week. And it is a good shortcut because many of the other sources that I've put out for you are reviewed already there and explained in the book. So it might be a good place to start. And it is available for free also. But whenever I talk about sketching in this workshop, I am basically borrowing that way of thinking about sketching from Bill Buxton, principal research manager at Microsoft Research, and who wrote this wonderful book 10 years ago, Sketching User Experiences, which is still by this day one of the best books on design I have ever read. Basically. It is phenomenal in showing how sketching fits modern design thinking, but also how it fits modern ways of looking at how we actually explore ideas in general. It is a great, great book. And if you have those 2 sources as your sort of main basis, then of course you can dive in dependent on what case you have in your specific semester project in some of the other sources I've put out. Some of you will focus more on representing things that happen over multiple touch points. Then you will pick and choose some sources that actually reflect more on that. Others of you will use more animation or more video, and you can pick and choose there. So it's not to say that all of this literature should be used in your exam assignments. It should not. You should use that which beneficially enables you to reflect on your service representations. All right. So, and the elephant in the room, the entire Corona situation, it of course changes the logistics a bit of a workshop like this that's normally very interactive and very much based on me being able to actually supervise on the spot when I see that you're doing something interesting in your groups. But we'll have to figure out another way this year. Of course, we have good old Moodle. And I don't know about you. If you love Moodle, you'll probably be the first persons in history to love Moodle. But we will, of course, use Moodle to upload all of our official messages. If I change the plan suddenly, if we upload the slides and materials to Moodle. So be mindful to check Moodle and check your university email also, because you might get messages from the messaging board there. But for the day-to-day interactions with what we're going to do here, I am going to use Discord. If you agree that that could be a good idea. I can see some of you have already joined the Discord server. Now, Discord is basically an online collaboration and communication tool, just like Microsoft Teams and Slack and what have you. The great thing about Discord is that in this period of the coronavirus epidemic, they have raised the amount of free users who can at the same time interact with video, voice, and screen sharing to 50 people. So lo and behold, that's the amount of persons that we need for this workshop. So that's why we use it. We can use it more dynamically than we would have been able to do in other kinds of collaborative online environments. And I will put up a small video where I quickly show how I have set up our room, our server on Discord, and for my proposal on how we will use it throughout the workshop week. So stay tuned. It will be in the same playlist on YouTube as this one. And speaking of YouTube, I have created a playlist on YouTube where I will upload gradually all the videos that I'm producing for this workshop, both the ones that we're doing now, the lectures themselves, but also the how-to videos when we figure out what you actually need throughout the week. Those small videos will also be uploaded to this playlist. I'll also, of course, link on both Discord and on Moodle, but we'll use YouTube for my videos at least. And I will also recommend that you use YouTube to upload your productions from the workshop here, so you can easier share them. You can also use Vimeo, of course, but YouTube is the most easily recognizable and easiest to find, and you can you have this feature of hiding your video, so only people with the link can see it, and that should sort of make it work in this context. I know on Vimeo you can also put some passwords on the videos, but it makes a problem if, for example, the censor for the exam can't access it because you forgot to write the password in the report or something like that. And finally, of course, we can also, if everything else fails, or if some of you really disagrees and for the whatever reason don't want to use Discord, we can do some of the supervision and some of the questions on Skype, but Skype just is slower. It is more cumbersome than Discord. So I hope that you are on board, most of you, with using Discord. And that's basically the 4 online collaborative tools that we're mainly going to use. And especially Discord, I have high hopes. I've used it for a week now since this coronavirus thing breakout. With some of my other students, and it has worked rather well. But this is the first time that we're having to do something that is this interactive, that usually is looking like this, with paper all over the floor, with stop motion going on, production of small video clips, collaborative in groups, etc. And sometimes it also looks like this, with the green screen recordings and stuff like that, instructions, directing, actors, etc. So it goes to say, of course, this situation this year will be a wee bit different. There will be some points where we have to think a bit creatively about how we actually enable you to make as many different visual effects and different techniques come to use as possible. Because this year it basically will be a bit of a lone wolf kind of thing. But I hope that you in your groups have ways of organizing. So one might sit and produce one thing that another person is using another place to combine with something, so you actually can collaborate on creating these video sketches throughout the week, even though that you might not sit in the same room. In the Discord explainer video that I'll upload later, I will show you how you can basically actually create a small group room where you can constantly be in touch with each other through voice and share your screen on and off. So you might have this interaction back and forth. And hopefully it will look more like this year, where even though we're on the individual machines, it will still be something that actually works out for most of us. Fingers crossed, at least. Luckily, at least, the tools that we're going to introduce, Adobe Premiere, some of the online animation tools, can be taught and used remotely. And I am figuring out 2 more things about the green screening effects and stuff like that. And I think I've found a neat way that you can also experiment with that at home too. And I'm uploading these intro videos and the method how-tos. They'll be gradually made available on YouTube for you to watch, so you can take it in your own pacing. And hopefully you can get some kind of co-producing pipeline up and running in the groups too. And remember then, that is probably the most important thing of this entire video. Remember not to be stressed about the quality of the videos that you're creating this week. This is not a course on creating commercial video production of high fidelity in terms of something that has to look good. This is about creating good design representations. That is, things that communicate design in a way so we can actually reflect on the idea that we have or show it to others and make them give us valuable feedback. It is not about making things look good. I'm going to show you it. I'm going to eat my own medicine and deliberately make all of the examples that I'm going to show you quite ugly. Because this is sketching, this is not art, this is not commercial video productions, even though we're using video tools to actually create it. And should there be some questions along the way, I hope that we can get some good online supervision up and running through Discord and have some good feedback sessions where you also help each other with giving feedback. And hopefully you can use all of these reflections in the exams. And it's an important thing to note here about the exam assignment that everyone, both the ones who are going to be your examinators and the censors, they will all know that this is changed conditions. This is other conditions than would usually be in a workshop like this. So don't be stressed out if you can't do real green screen effects and show that you can do that and reflect upon how that method works in your exam assignment. We all know that there is a new name of the game that is Corona, that is isolation, that is video lectures, etc. They know that when they assess your assignment. So don't panic, basically. And if everything else fails throughout the week here, but also in the coming weeks where you might have to finalize some of the sketches or stuff like that, finalize productions of the prototypes, contact me, contact Dan. We are all in the best interest of making this work this year, so it doesn't burn down. But sort of in the previous years, the workshop has seen quite the mix of different fidelities. It has been really interesting each year to see how big a difference there actually is when we see how this workshop actually manifests itself. Some ends up only doing stop motion sketches for the entire workshop, and they work wonders. It is not a negative thing. It is great. Some of the best sketches I've seen has been purely stop motion. Others go up and actually make a mashup of pre-produced sketches, pre-produced videos from the internet, and mix them up in a new way. Do something creative that becomes higher fidelity by that way. And others end up actually creating something that is quite high fidelity, where they mix green screen with motion graphic effects, with keyframed animation to create a representation of what they need. That's the one in the lower right corner here, where they actually simulated an entire future hospital environment, for example. But just to say that basically anything goes as long as it actually enables you to reflect upon the design problems and enables you to communicate with others through storytelling how and what you think is a desirable design outcome. But I think it would make sense to actually watch now 3 quite different examples of an animation-based video sketch from the previous years, just to show you how different it can all be. And tomorrow in the video sketching lecture, I will show you a lot of more examples and sort of pinpoint more the specific techniques used. But let's take 3 short videos here. Now, the first one here is a group who worked together with a company called Ask Cody. They work with navigation in the healthcare sector. They sort of work with limiting the waste amount of time when we move between contexts. And this group developed this kind of digital service which should minimize wait times in the healthcare sector. Something very relevant right now, basically. Let's see the clip, not the entire clip, but some of it. And I'm sorry it's in Danish, but hopefully you'll get some sense of it either way. Yeah, and as you can see, this one is rather high fidelity. You can see actually only one person represented in the video, so you could do it individually, basically placing the camera and then acting out. But you can see they have this mix of showing the context, showing some details about the micro level of this wayfinding application service, and then they also mocked up these info scanners, basically, which is just cardboard where they extrapolated some effects upon. And this is very high fidelity for a video sketch produced in a couple of days. It's produced in 2 days, this one. But of course, one of the things that you can also see, it nearly becomes too finalized. There isn't a lot of sort of holes for us to actually pick and point to, okay, could this actually be different? What if we tweak this? It is nearly too didactic, so to speak. It tells us very clearly what the design is and what it's not. So that's just to say, even though it looks good, it actually also might constrain some of the design feedback that we could gather. But again, it looks good, and this specific one didn't have many problems. It actually communicated rather well. But just to say that it doesn't have to be that high fidelity. Here's another example from a museum that a couple of students worked with a couple of years ago, who were going in a situation where they had to be autonomous. They had to be unmanned, basically, and reflected upon how could a service system create a sustainable user experience for the users, even though the museum personnel would not be there anymore. And they created it more or less through stop motion and a little bit of keyframe animation. And let's look at it now.
Experience held Skanse as the 17th century Danish military bastion. Electronic character cards will put you in the boots of a 17th century Danish soldier. Each soldier with their own story to be told. Who will you become? Listen to history told by historic personalities, including the Danish hero, Commander Anders Lauritsen.
What's your name, scumbag? Do you think I'm cute? Do you think I'm funny?
As a cannoneer, defend the coast against invading fleets.
Gotcha, bitch!
Download and use the museum's app, so you through your smartphone can view an epic battle taking place in the outdoor surroundings of Hald Skanse.
Yeah, and as you can see, this is way lower fidelity, but I would argue it still communicates more or less as effective what this design concept is all about. When do you do what? What are the touch points? What are the digital elements? What are the physical elements? And how do you journey between the touch points of this museum service, basically? And it was in lower fidelity, and thus both the sketch here is actually longer, but they also managed to create 4 different variants of the same concept on the time. So it's also something about being economical. If we say that this is actually a sketch, be sure to choose a fidelity that actually fits what you're having as an ambition to create. But just to show you that even though this is low fidelity, we can go even lower actually. And this is a wonderful, simple sketch made a couple of years ago when the migrant crisis in the Middle East was really big. And the students worked with how to create data-driven solutions to handle the migration problems in the West here. And this is made solely via what's called an animatic, where you basically just film still photos and put on a audio layer to make it sort of narrative and dramatic. And to see how much they actually managed to communicate with such simple measures here.
After his long journey from Syria, Ali arrives in Copenhagen Central Station and is full of questions of what's going to happen next. Ali opens the Refujourney app and gets an overview of both the long and short-term milestones. The app is user-friendly and supports him in making the right decisions. Ali is asked to provide information about age, gender, marital status, profession, and personal goals, so the app can generate customized content. Three months later, Ali is still using the Refujourney app on a daily basis. This way he keeps informed about his rights, activities in his local environment, and his asylum process. In addition,
so you can see here, there is a very few tools needed to actually make a compelling story, which actually revolves around some kind of design concept. And this one actually goes on to show sort of the data chain. This one is one out of, I think they made 7 sketches total, in which they began to then dive into different aspects. The app aspect, the cloud aspect, and of course went into higher fidelity there. But this was a great example of one of the earliest sketches where they didn't want to spend time to actually create something that was high fidelity, when they actually just wanted to explore, is this actually a promising idea to create an app-based cloud service in this way? So it goes to tell us that in this workshop, we will see many different fidelities. Some of you might have experience in video and animation tools. You might end up going straight to a higher fidelity. With others of you, you might have never done this before and dive into a lower fidelity, and it really doesn't matter, because what we see each year is is that it's all about how well are you actually at addressing these design representations as narratives, as ways of communicating your design to other people and reflecting upon what is the important thing to actually tell and ask here and now. And then Fidelity is just sort of the aesthetic top layer, which, yeah, it can look nice, but again, this is a design sort of tool. It is not the output. It's not the final design itself. So it is all about that we ask this classic design question. We're just asking you this week, ask all of the what if questions that you're already doing in your semester projects. Maybe you already have a concept. Maybe you're only getting started. But basically, here we begin to experiment, say some experimental what if questions. And the only difference is that in this workshop, we deal with it through storytelling. And what can we do with storytelling through video and animation? And that is basically the topic for the next video lecture here. That will be introducing this method of design fiction as sort of the overall methodology. Sort of the method and the background theory that a lot of the video sketching methodology and video sketching tools will be sort of centered around. It is sort of our narrative hook for the entire workshop. It will be something along the way of 2 normal lectures, so a bit more than an hour probably, and hopefully you will stay tuned for some design fiction. All right, see you in the next video.